Okay, good morning, Dan. I'm happy to talk to you, and I haven't had contact with you in 20 some years, something like that.
I know it's amazing, but in some ways it feels like just it's never stopped.
So tell me about the beginning of your life. Where did you grow up, and how did entertainment come into your life?
I grew up in Alma, Michigan, a little town right in the center of the mitten. It's funny when we're kids, whenever you wanted to say where somebody lived in Michigan, you just held up your hand and you pointed where they were in the mitten, and we were right in the center. And but it was a nice little town because it was a college town, and still is, and has a very good college there with quite a good reputation. And so in the area there, you got a little bit of everything. You had the college kids and the professors, and you had the kids that lived in the farms around. We used to get ice cream made directly from the local cows that they would, would come in. And it was a great mix of people to grow up with. Of course, like everybody, I couldn't wait to get out of there. But as I look back, it was really a wonderful place to grow up. And
was there at least a movie theater?
There was a movie theater, which actually now is a community theater, because they built a much larger theater when stuff started spreading on the outskirts of town, and they got the Walmart and the Target and that. They built a larger movie theater, and the community theater took over the Strand. And that's where we all went when we were kids, to the Strand. And
what
so it was
movies,
kind of
what movies can you recall being particularly exciting to you?
well, we always went at the Saturday matinee, and it was 20 cents. And Mom would always give us a quarter. I have one brother, give us a quarter. So we could have 20 cents for the movie, and then we had 5 cents for candy. And she got very upset when she found out that we were buying Luden's cough drops because they tasted like candy. And we'd eat a whole box of cough drops during the movie. And most of the time we would go for comedies, Abbott and Costello and all of those kind of shows were shown at the Saturday matinee. Mostly stuff that kids would enjoy. And back then, every movie started with a cartoon, and sometimes it had the little news clips. But it was funny because nowadays you'll go into a movie theater, when you're allowed, and even the big movies, there's always empty seats. And I remember when we were kids, you'd always try to get there early because you didn't want to end up in the front row. It's looking up at the movie like this. And the ushers were always going around, with the lights, the flashlight, during the movie, get your feet off the seats, off the back of the seat. And but it was a very fun time. And
how many seats would you guess were in the theater?
I bet there were probably at least 300. There might have been 500 because there was a balcony. And of course, when I was growing up, that was the only entertainment, or unless you went to the drive-in movie in the summer. But so for a community theater, it's made a really nice space for them.
The police out getting you right now? I hear sirens. We're sneaking into the movie theater one night in the 50s.
They come after you. I don't know. I actually don't know how you snuck into that movie theater. But at that time,
wasn't there a exit door that somebody could open the exit door for you?
The doors that I remember were there were always ushers there. And back then, you'd go to a matinee and there'd be probably 6 ushers working and they were always in the theater, up and down the aisles all the time, you know. And
these were grown-ups, were they fairly grown-up
oh yeah,
ushers?
grown-up ushers, definitely. Yeah, it would be like having the teachers or the nuns walking up and down supervising you, and the minute something went wrong, flash on, the light went right on you, you know.
So you
whatever
went to a Catholic school then? Is that?
I went to Catholic school. We had the Dominican sisters that sometimes I still visit when I go home. My family still lives in Alma, and when I go home, sometimes I stop there. Mother house of the sisters is in Grand Rapids, and usually when I fly in, I go to Grand Rapids, and sometimes I stop to visit them on the way up to Alma when I come.
But you were happy in Catholic school?
I was, you know, I think we were one of the only Catholic schools that the nuns were really fun. From some of the stories.
So there's no ruler?
There was no ruler. Now, it was in the 50s, and I think we were pretty well behaved. You know, the nuns had that certain authority when they all had the traditional habits and everything, and you know, you just kind of automatically would behave. Although, you know, I got sent out in the hall a few times and stuff like that for, you know,
Well, that was
talking.
a punishment. You were told to be in the hall until they called you back.
Yes, you had to go out and stand in the hall, and then if you were talking out of turn or something like that, and that could be your punishment. Or we had another sister that whatever you did, if you were, you know, chewing gum in class or something, she'd just say to you, a paper, and you had to put your name on a lined paper and put it on her desk. And at the end of the day, she wrote on the paper what your punishment. It'd be like, I will not chew gum in class, and you had to write that 100 times and bring it back the next day. But as I say, our nuns were pretty good. They were fun. They used to come out to recess with us and, you know, play games and stuff like that. But also, as I say, there weren't the problems back in the 50s that we see in school now.
Was there smoking? Was there smoking?
I don't remember that. When we went to high school, then that they had that kind of thing, but you know, finding beer bottles behind the football stadium, that kind of thing. But because high school, the Catholic school was just for grade school, and then high school we went to the public school in the town, and but even then, I mean, there were problems, but nothing like there is today. Mostly, if there was problems, it was like, you know, drinking or smoking, but beer, stuff like that. Not serious like we have now.
So when did music come in your life in terms of your writing or?
I always liked music, and it was funny. I've been talking to people about this now, because many theaters that will book our shows will say, do you have music tracks? And I resisted it for a long time. I really just wanted the show live, and especially when you're doing comedy, you want to be able to hold for laughs and stuff, even if it's in a song. And but then we started discovering now it's very hard for the theaters to find people who play the piano well enough to play for a show. And I think it's because kids start on their phones and all the kinds of gimmicky stuff so young. When we were kids, it seemed like every kid had to go for piano lessons, whether you liked it or not. That was one of your things. And I remember we used to go to a lady named Mrs. Bowman. She would shoo her cat off the piano keys and sit down with you, and you'd put 50 cents in her cup, and she'd give you a half-hour piano lesson. And at the end of the year, usually after 1 year, then, you know, if you liked it, you'd keep going. But if you didn't, your parents would let you not continue. But you had to do it at least once. And but I enjoyed it. And then living in the college town, the college music teachers would take students, young students, on the weekends. And that's how they would make some little extra money themselves, by teaching privately. And so I really enjoyed it. And then to get me to practice, my mom said, if you practiced really hard, they might let you play the organ at church. And I just thought that would be really cool to be able to play the organ at church. And eventually I did. And that's when I really got into music and really studying it, and enjoying learning about music, and singing a lot. And because I would sing the masses every day, they'd have mass. And
there were no musicals in high school. They didn't do Oklahoma.
Yeah, we had musicals in high school, and I would play for those. There were like 3 of us who could play well enough, and if a lot of times they did Gilbert and Sullivan. That was the kind of stuff was very popular in our school. And I remember they would divide it up between 2 or 3 pianists, and so you know, I would play in that way. And but then also I started taking voice lessons at the college. And they discovered that I was a countertenor, and that was pretty neat at the time. And I got really fascinated by it all, and decided that I would go to music school, or at least try. And I auditioned, and I got into Manhattan School of Music here in New York. And but I got in as a voice student, and I really was heading toward.
Are you hoping to go to Broadway? Was Broadway?
Well, it's funny. I wasn't, and what happened, because most at that time the countertenor music was all, you know, the old English madrigal stuff, and there was a group in New York called the Pro Musica Antiqua, and you know, they sang all the old music. And I thought that would be something to, you know, have be as a goal to get into Pro Musica Antiqua. But when I was 19, the Broadway show Luther was casting, and it was the story of Martin Luther, starring Albert Finney. It was Albert Finney's American debut as an actor. And they needed a countertenor, because there were four of us who sang, like when they was in the monastery and all that. And then also they sang, we sang like almost like a soundtrack, behind scene changes and stuff like that. We would sing off stage. And I went in and auditioned, and I got the job. I couldn't believe it. I was 19. I'd never been on a stage really in my life, and never took acting or anything like that. But when I sang, they liked it. And the next day they called, and they said, you got the job. And it's so funny, because at the time, when I was trying to make a little extra money, I was working at Olston's Temporaries as a typist. And I could make $75 a week if I only took a half hour for lunch. And at the time, the Broadway minimum was $117.50. I'll never forget it. And so I left school completely and went into the Broadway show, and I was making $117.50 a week. Bruce, I was so rich, I didn't know where to spend the money.
And where were you living? Living with other people?
Yeah, I had a roommate who also had come from Michigan, and we lived in a ground floor of a brownstone on 20th Street off 9th Avenue here in Manhattan. And we had the private entrance, because you had to go down like 2 or 3 steps under the ones that went up to the top. And there was a little garden in the back, and the rent was $187.50 a month, and we split it. But those days are long gone. And
is this not a David? Is this not a David Merrick production?
Yes, it was a David Merrick production.
Did you have any?
I'm sorry?
Did you have any connection to David Merrick? Did you ever have a word with him, or he have a word with you?
Oh yeah, I mean, he would come in and watch the show, and at that time, I mean, this was a play, and we had 28 people in it, and 8 of the stars had come from London, because the show had been done in London. And Tony Richardson was the director, and David Merrick would come around every now and then to just check things out. And I knew that he was a tough producer, but he was always wonderful with us. I mean, I think everything was going well, and there wasn't anything really to complain about. And the surprise of it all was the show was an enormous hit, and we won the Tony, and Albert Finney was like the new Olivier. And I don't think David Merrick expected it to run as long as it did. And they had already booked, we were in the St. James Theater, and they had already booked Hello, Dolly in. And so we had to move to the Lunt-Fontanne to keep going. And the funniest thing of all was, as we were preparing to move, this would have been 1963 and 64, and beginning of, we opened in 63. In 64, Dolly was coming in. Our top ticket on the weekends was $9.90. And
matinees were $4.95, because I went to the St. James in 62 when I saw Subways for Sleeping.
Oh, right. Yeah, we must have come in quite after that. But David Merrick had announced that he was going to raise the weekend price for Hello, Dolly from $10 to $11.
Ooh.
And we all said, it's going to close. There's no question the show will close, because nobody will pay $11 for a musical. That was
seems ridiculous. A reasonable dollar. I mean,
Yeah. And well, of course, Dolly was a huge hit, and it only gone from 11 to about 1,100.
So how long did you run at the Lunt-Fontanne?
We ran until the end of the season, just before the summer. I think we closed like in May, June, somewhere like that. But then we actually did 2 tours. We did a first tour that was like a first class national, and then we did a bus and truck tour with other stars. But it was just an incredible experience for me, because first of all, I'd never seen much of the country other than Alma, Michigan, and New York City, which is quite an expanse. And so I got to see a great deal of the country and get paid for it. So it was a wonderful experience.
Did you get any raise? I mean, on the road, how did the road work?
On the road, we got road minimum and a per diem. And I can't remember how much it was, but I do remember that after the tours were over, I had saved $2,500, which back then would have been what, like 65, in 1965. It was like $1 million. And my mom said one day, she said, "Didn't you think it was going to last forever when you looked in the savings account?" And then, of course, it started to dwindle. And it was like, oh my. And then the reality came that show business wasn't as easy as it seemed when I got into Luther. You know, it was a
Did
very
you start to audition?
yeah, I did. But at the same time, there was one of the other guys in Luther who was one of the singers, and I had started doing sort of comedy folk singing, and I would sing countertenor and he would sing baritone, and we had an electric harpsichord. And so we decided, well, maybe we could just, you know, make a go of that. And we started doing it. And the first job we had was at a place called Folk City, and it was in the village. And I think, can't remember what, I think it was like on Washington Square North, up that, right around Washington Square. And we were there with Jose Feliciano. We were the opening act. And then a manager who somebody hooked us up with saw us and said he thought he could get us jobs. And for 5 years, we played in the coffee houses around the country. Back then was, you know, Peter, Paul, and Mary and all those people. And so that it was, you could make enough money to pay your rent and stuff. It was pretty steady. And then the colleges started building coffee houses in the colleges. And Fred Weintraub, who ran the bitter end and managed Peter, Paul, and Mary and some of those other people, started this thing called the college, the coffee house circuit or something. And they would block book. So they would send you out for maybe 8-10 weeks, and you'd play a week at each college. And they would be sometimes, you know, in the basement of some of the student union or something. And they would give you housing in the college. And
are you driving?
yeah, oh yeah. It was put the harpsichord in the back of the station wagon, and you know, just head out on the road. We used to find, I remember whenever we went south from New York, we always brought a picnic if it was nice weather. And we would always stop at a roadside picnic table in Lorton, Virginia. It got to be that all these interstates were kind of becoming your backyard. You know, you knew what was what and what was where and that kind of thing. And so that.
Are you writing the songs? Are you the composer? And
for the first part, I wasn't. And then after a couple of years, the manager said, if we weren't going to write our own stuff, it was going to be really hard to get us a record contract, because at that point the recording companies wanted money from the songs as well as the, you know, the singing and that and the performers, so that you know, if you were doing other people's songs, they didn't get that, of course. So and that's when I started writing. And it was kind of hard at first. Writing music wasn't so hard, but coming up with lyrics was hard. And
what were some titles of songs you were?
Way back then, oh my goodness, I hardly remember. It's so long ago.
Were they sort of generic? Were they generic folk songs? You weren't angry, you weren't protesting?
We did some generic stuff, but we did also comedy stuff that we would mix in with from the old Julius Monk's reviews. And there was a song that Dixie Carter actually did at one of the reviews, and it was called The Pill, and it was about when birth control pills first came on the market. And it was very funny because it was sung like an old English madrigal, but it was a hilarious song. And you know, we would do that with the harpsichord and all that. People loved that. And there was another comedy song about the Peace Corps. And then we always ended the show with a spoof of the Messiah and it was always about whoever the current president was and all the foibles of the president. And once I got writing like that, I could do it fairly well. But I ran into a friend of mine named Bob Lorick, who was an actor and also had kind of toyed with writing lyrics. And we wanted to get off the road, and they said, well, you can't get off the road and put a show like off-Broadway unless you have, it has to be original. They're not going to have you come in and sing songs that you do in your act. And so Bob and I said, you know what, let's see if we can write a show. And we wrote, he wrote lyrics and I wrote music for an off-Broadway show called Hark, H-A-R-K. And we played it at the Mercer Arts Center, which since...
Which eventually fell down.
That's the one that fell down, yes, the whole thing. And it turned out, I guess, when they had built it or adjusted, because it was the back part of a welfare hotel, that they had evidently weakened the structural walls and stuff, and no one knew it. And thank God, you know, it was in the middle of the night, and so no one was in it, because the whole thing just crashed down. It was 2 or 3 floors. And but when we opened that show, and we were both in the folk singing partner and I were in it, plus 4 other people, and it got lovely reviews. And we ran for a whole summer, but the producer was a music publisher who didn't really know how to promote the show. So we had a nice summer run, but I think it probably could have gone longer if we had known how to promote it. But the beautiful thing was that it opened the doors to working in the theater as writers for Bob Lorick and me. And so then as that was finishing, Bob had an idea that we could write a musical version of The Adding Machine by Elmer Rice. And we wrote this musical. And by that time, we were represented by ICM, the big agency, which was good because, you know, of course, they would hook us up with everybody. And we would write the score, and they would bring producers either to the office at ICM where they had a music room, or we would go to the producer's house and sing the score. And Bruce, it was so amazing because I mean, I had read the book, and Bob wrote the book too, but I mean, I'd read the original play, and I knew that it wasn't, you know, just a happy-go-lucky, no, Nanette play, right. But I didn't realize how dark it was. And this was long before, you know, Sweeney Todd or any of those dark musicals. So we would sing the score, and then, oh my gosh, this is just fabulous. This is, we're going to do this. This is just great. And then we'd give them the script and they'd go home. And a few days later, we'd always get the call, we can't possibly put this on. And we just couldn't do it.
What kind of money do you think would have been necessary to launch this?
I know that Dolly cost $200,000. Wow. And I think it didn't have that many people, but I would say back then you were probably looking for 200 or something.
Do you want it to be on Broadway?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it was big, and they were taking us all to the main producers, like back then Kermit Bloomgarden and St. Suber and
what about David Merrick? Did you go to David?
We didn't go to David Merrick, and I don't know that he had retired by then.
Oh no.
Because now this would have been probably, well, it would have been after 73, would have been more like 1975. I don't know when he did it.
42nd Street was his last, and that was 1980.
Oh no, yeah. So it would have been a little before that, but I think that for whatever reason, or maybe he wasn't looking for stuff, Robert Whitehead was probably one of the famous ones. And the best story about Robert Whitehead came to my apartment to hear the thing, and he brought Zoe Caldwell. And they came in, and my introduction to Zoe Caldwell was and you could see she was very much pregnant. And she said, I normally couldn't have come tonight because I was supposed to be on Broadway, but as you can see, Robert fucked me out of the part. That was my introduction to Zoe Caldwell, and I just adored her. But
did you have major stars that you could have put into?
We had talked to them. I mean, people like I remember Alan Alda came to see it about directing it, and Madeline Kahn came, and there were many people that were like, you know, interested. But like I say, every time the producers would read the book, and then flash forward years later, a company at the Goodman Theater in Chicago did a version of The Adding Machine, and it came to New York for a limited run at the Minetta Lane Theater. Now, our show wrote it, Bob and I, we wrote it in a very Broadway style, because we thought it would be a nice juxtaposition to make this dark story, but with music that felt like a Broadway show. Well, this show came in, and it was very avant-garde music, you know. I went there and you came in, you know that. I don't know how the actors learned it. But anyway, when I saw the play on its feet, when it ended, I thought, no wonder nobody wanted to produce this. This is the most horrifying story. This made Sweeney Todd look fun. And I mean, the end of the play is like, everything in the world is terrible. You're terrible. Everybody in the audience is terrible. Go out and get run over by a bus, because nothing is going to improve. It's only going to get worse. And I thought, oh, that must be just such a charming thing to go and see. And so then it's like, you know, 20, 30 years later, it hits me in the head. No wonder they read the book and said, we can't put this on Broadway. I said one time to one of the agents, I said, I think maybe if we had presented it after Sweeney Todd, we might have had a chance where they would let us do it, because they did love the score. But it moved us into writing stuff, and then we started writing industrial trade shows. And
who were the people you were writing for?
The first ones we did were L'Oreal. We were introducing hair mousse to the market. And
did every song have to refer to the product?
Oh yeah, everything. Some of them, they'd give you the buzzwords, you know, they wanted to have in there, and that was always a challenge to try to put all the buzzwords in. And we did quite a few of those, and people said we were very lucky, because totally as a fluke, the people liked us when we did the L'Oreal show, and the big industrial production company house would hire us. And we always got high-end companies for the most part. We got Halston, we got Charles of the Ritz, Yves Saint Laurent, that kind of thing. And so the companies were very classy companies. They would let us do really fun stuff. And other people that we knew who wrote the trade shows said, oh, you guys are so lucky to have those companies. They said, you know, we did X, Y, Z, and they would tell us the horrible things. And then one time we got hired by Hostess, which made Wonder Bread and all that.
Cupcakes? Did you have a cupcake song?
There was two characters that were employees that we had to use on the stage. And one was dressed as a loaf of Wonder Bread, and the other one was dressed as a Hostess Twinkie. And we had to write for that. And the other places that when they would have their people come, you know, because usually it was the national annual sales meeting.
And this is one performance, right? One performance.
and you one performance, but you'd go and you'd be at a fabulous resort because they want to treat their employees. And your show was the opening of the meeting. And then at the end of the week, you do a wrap up and have songs and stuff that kind of, they do huge slideshows showing all the activities and funny stuff and everything. But during the week, you were just totally on vacation and you could sign for everything. Well, the Wonder Bread people, they had people fly into Chicago. They went to the meeting, which was a hotel right next to the airport. And at the night, they flew them back. And so there are no treats for anybody. And then we kind of got to say, oh my gosh, that's what all these other people are talking about, and why we were so lucky to be going to places like, you know, the Arizona Biltmore Hotel and that kind of thing. And but it was very good money. And then what happened was
people left shows to do industrials.
Absolutely, yeah, because the pay was great. You know, it literally would be like going on a 1 or 2 week vacation, and they would let you sign for your food and stuff. And that again was because we were lucky enough to be with these companies that were just very generous and very high end and treated you like gold. And we did come up with good shows, I must say, and that they always complimented us that we made the sales meetings so much fun, and you know, and yet sold their products and that kind of thing. But then we got an offer to do, I'm trying to think what company it was. It was another one of these big high-end companies, you know, fragrance and beauty and all that kind of stuff. And Bob was working on another project and he couldn't do the show. And it was, I think at the time, the pay for it was $15,000, which was a fortune. And I said, I cannot turn this down because, you know, this will float me through quite a few rent bills. And so I just said, I'm going to have to learn how to write lyrics. And I said, yes, I would do the show. And so I thought, you know, what have I set myself up for? But of course, I had worked with Bob and seen how the lyrics kind of came together. And then I realized, and why you don't think about this before, I don't know, but I know Stephen Sondheim said one time, he said, I can't just write a song. If you say, and that was part of the problem when we were doing the folk singing. If they say, he says, I have to know something. I have to know, you know, who is the song about, or what is, I can't just go in the back and say, okay, I'll write. Or if they say, write me a love song, I need more. And the cool thing and helpful thing about doing the industrials was that they would give you XYZ information about the product, which they would like in the song. And I suddenly realized that all you have to do is tell a story and then make it rhyme. And I thought, who knew? So I started working that way, and it worked. And I thought, this is incredible. Incredible in the sense that it was like, wow, the lights came on. And I thought, you know, they would tell you, like, in fact, one of the songs I stole the title and put it in the first Nunsense. It was a show for the people who made Angeli perfume and another kind of perfume and their competition was Charlie from Revlon. And their pitch for their product, their perfume, was the biggest ain't the best. And so the whole idea was that they were in competition with Revlon, which at the time was the biggest with Charlie. And but theirs was better with Angeli, if you want a really classy perfume. And so wrote this song called The Biggest Ain't the Best. And they had different points in there about you know, the perfume. And so I was able to create the song. And when I was doing Nunsense, I had this one little competition song in that I needed, that where the one of the nuns who really wished she was a mother superior was trying to convince another sister that, you know, you can be the most important without being the biggest one. And I thought, oh, that's good. I'll just rewrite all these lyrics and I'll have it all set. And which is what I did. But it really schooled me in how to write a show, how to put a song, to write the lyrics and put a song together. And the great thing about it was you had a deadline. So you had to finish, you know, and it was always a reasonable deadline. It would be like, if you were hired, you'd be hired 6 or 8 weeks out from the show. But they were all full 2-hour shows. It wasn't like, you know, you just wrote a little opening song
So
for them.
how many songs would you say typically?
Oh, I bet there were probably maybe 10, 12. And then there would be a book along with it, sometimes more. But usually probably 10, 12 songs.
You weren't involved with the book. Someone else wrote
no,
the book.
we had to write the book for the opening. Now they would give us tons of information, but you had to write it and you had to come up with a concept. Like one time we had to set up this deal that a reporter from a newspaper had come to interview the people. And so that would be part of the book story. And then it would go into a musical, just like the old time musicals used to do. And the best one we ever did was for Charles of the Ritz. And they had some new products. And it was done something like Jeopardy, but with different groups of contestants would come up, and they had the whole board with us and the signal buttons and all this, and they had the host, and then they would sing a song about something, and then they'd ask people questions that they should know and about the new products, and they would trap the customer, the salespeople that way, and then, you know, they would explain what it is, or and that was one of the most fun ones. But you would write all the questions and stuff, and we'd go back and forth always to the headquarters of the companies and run things by them, and they'd tell us, you know, can you do this, can you do that? And they always had tons of money. And the original ones, we had live orchestras that might have been orchestrated for, you know, 15, 20 musicians.
Were they Broadway orchestrators?
Oh yeah. And again, and
who?
the one I remember, his name was Ted. And why I'm so bad with names. I was bad with names when I was young, and I'm bad with names now. But his name
Ted Simmons. Ted Simmons.
Yeah, Ted Simons. Yes, Ted was one of them, and he did a lot of them in big orchestrations. And you know, you'd have the whole orchestra out there, and so that they were just like first class musicals. And the other thing was, not only did you get the good money, but you knew your show was going on. You didn't have to like finish the whole thing and then go around and start knocking on doors and everybody tell you no after you did all that work. You knew for sure that if you put in your hours and you did a good job in your 6 or 8 weeks, your show was going on and you were going to get paid well. So that was a wonderful way. And like you say, stars and Broadway orchestrators in that,
Well,
you know,
who were some stars?
With us, we had people. I'm even trying to think. It's been so long.
You ever Hal Linden? I know Hal Linden did a lot of industrial.
Hal Linden did some of them, and I can't remember if we had Karen Ziemba or not. I know Karen really well. I've worked with her a lot, but and then there was, you know, the Milliken show, of course, was the big one.
Yes, I went to the Milliken show.
Milliken show was always just parodies, and we did all original stuff. So they, in fact, one of the companies loved the stuff so much they recorded it and gave it to their employees, made records of it.
So
but
what one was that?
that was L'Oreal. They
Recall the name of that show?
and we had that was the year that their theme song was putting it all together, and we wrote this song that had a really great orchestration, and I'm totally, you know, in the dark when it comes to orchestrating. I always have the people, this is the song, this is the, and then they do it, but it was a beautiful orchestration with trumpets and all this stuff going, and so it was just an incredible writing learning experience that unfortunately today I think writers don't have, as actors don't either, with so few theaters, the pandemic aside, but to be able to really practice the craft and learn how to do it, and you know, playing for an audience that had to sit there with if they liked you or not, and it was a really good time.
Does one-way ticket to Broadway come after this?
That came after that. Then we started doing reviews, and again we would go out and play. It would be almost like you would summer stock or something, and actually in the summer we'd play the Jewish resorts, and those were
you were in Florida?
reviews. I'm sorry?
You were in Florida?
No, in the Catskills.
Catskills.
Back there, yeah. We would play the Catskills, and that was an experience you just couldn't forget. But it was fun, and most of the places treated us quite nicely. And I shouldn't even put it that way. It sounds like somebody was horrible to us, but there were the places where they thought treat you like you were the star, and there were the other places that you were just the help. There were the waiters, there was the cooks, and there was the singers. And I remember one place we came into the front desk of the resort, and the woman at the front desk said something like, "Morty, the characters are supposed to sing it here." And that was us, the characters who were supposed to sing. And then there was another one that was just kind of the opposite. It was called Bill Hans. It was a beautiful place, and it looked like many houses hooked together, like little colonial houses, just beautiful. And all the rooms were different, with different kinds of wallpaper, and beautifully decorated, everything just beautiful. And before our show, he would come into the audience and say, "Now, does anybody have to use the restroom? Because if you do, I want you to go now. You're not to get up and go in and out while the singers are singing." And they were very, very good about it. And then some of the others it would just be like mayhem. People, you know, you'd be singing along, and you'd hear them, "Sylvia, come sit with us." But again, you know, I mean, it just taught you everything, you know, how to deal with stuff. And if they weren't with you, you had to just plow on or try to get them with you. And then other times, of course, it was just a piece of cake. You went in and they just cheered and loved you, and you know, you thought you were the best thing since sliced bread. So
were you generally given all the food you could eat?
They always would feed you. Yes, they were very generous that way. And some of the places, again, they would want you to sit out with the people and sort of greet them and talk to different ones at different tables for fun. And then there are the other ones that you ate in the kitchen with the waiters. But they always gave you plenty of food, and good food. And so that was also a nice treat. So even the ones that weren't as glamorous, they were always kind to us, and it was always a learning experience if it wasn't the most enjoyable.
So did you do one-way ticket at a resort?
We would do, yeah, those type of shows. We did that, and then after that, I think that's when I got the Nun. I had done background music for a musical, for a play called Legend with Elizabeth Ashley on Broadway. But that show was just not going to work from the beginning. It was interesting. It was written by Samuel Taylor, who wrote Sabrina. And they had played it in the Kennedy Center with Elizabeth Ashley, and it was a success, and they wanted to bring it into New York. But we kind of learned along the way that they said anything with Elizabeth Ashley at the Kennedy Center will sell, because the Washington audience adored her and they'd go to anything. And this is a Western, and Bobby Drivus, who was directing it, wanted to have like a whole soundtrack, like a Western movie soundtrack. And so I wrote the music for that and recorded it, but it was doomed. The play just wasn't right. And the review said, how was it? The playbill said, this marks a turn in Samuel Taylor's writing. Unfortunately, no one gave him a roadmap. So that was kind of a sad thing. And there was a lot of shoot 'em up in it with, I mean, real guns, but blanks.
How many songs were there?
That one, they were enough to make an album. So I probably wrote at least 10 songs that played either during scenes or scene changes and stuff. I mean, it was really like
live musicians.
No, it was all taped, but really nice group of musicians that we had for it. And but the funny thing was, we rehearsed in the New Amsterdam roof before they had redone the New Amsterdam, and it was in the Ziegfeld Private Theater up there,
right,
which it's truly like Phantom of the Opera. There was the guts of an old big giant organ, and theater seats were kind of there, and some were broken and stuff, and they would just turn on bare bulb lights, and we'd rehearse up there. But there was always these scenes where there'd be the shoot 'em up, and evidently some robbers figured out the times during the rehearsal when the shoot 'em up would go. And so they went in and they robbed the theater down below.
Oh,
the robbers did it. Nobody called the police because they thought it was the rehearsal. I don't know how much they got away with, but it was kind of funny that they figured all this out to know that when it was just bam, 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 they could go in there and do that. But it was fascinating being up there in the Ziegfeld space. But that was just short-lived, and that's when the mannequin that started the whole Nunsense thing arrived. A Dominican brother friend of mine, as a joke, gave me a mannequin dressed as a Dominican sister. The nuns had started modernizing their habits and changing, so the old traditional habits were, in a box or something. And he got this mannequin, dressed her all up as a Dominican nun, and so she stayed in my apartment, and it was a joke. Everybody in the neighborhood knew about Sister Mary mannequin over there in the apartment. And one time we were actually working on a trade show, and the photographer knew about the mannequin and said, you know what, why don't we make a greeting card of the mannequin? And we thought that might be kind of fun. And but we realized, we talked to some different people, and they said, well, if you want to sell any greeting cards or do anything with it, you really need to have like a little line of them. You need like 12 cards. And we knew the mannequin couldn't make any expression, so that wasn't going to work. But my friend Marilyn Farina, who was a dental hygienist, was one of the funniest women I knew. And I said to Marilyn one day, I said, you want to be a nun on a greeting card? She said, sure. She was always game for anything like that. So we made the greeting card, and we made 12 comic images. And by a total fluke, we got into the National Stationery Show, which was being held in the Coliseum when that was still in Columbus Circle. And we had no money to make a display or anything. So all we did was we put the 12 images on a big foam core and put it on a stand, and we had a 4x8 booth. But we got Marilyn to be in the booth as the nun. And we were on the fourth floor. And on the first floor was Hallmark. And they had a display that it was took up half the first floor. It would be like in the most giant card store you've ever been in with, just exquisite display cases and everything. And one day we came in, the thing lasted for like a week. We came in, it wasn't too crowded. And we said to one of the guards or something, said, "Oh, where is everybody?" He said, "Oh, they're all up there on the fourth floor with that damn nun." So she, of course, would entertain them and everything. And Bruce, by the time the thing was over, we had sold 38,000 cards. We were getting orders from card representatives around the country who were, of course, all there. And one be like, take me, I can do better than she can. These are my clients. I've got everybody in Boston and everybody in Chicago. And like the next day we were in the card business. And so we kept making images and stuff. And for about, I guess, almost 2 years, we would be selling these cards. Marilyn would sometimes go and make appearances at card stores. And then at one point, we thought, you know what? We all work in the theater. Maybe we could make this into a show. And my neighbor, Steve Hayes, was a stand-up comic. And we were talking one day, and he had some sketches that he said, "Well, I don't know, these might be able to work." And he worked with a girl. They were very funny. They were kind of like a Nichols and May type act, and very, very funny. And he said, "Well, I think maybe some of these sketches I could adjust and we could make them into a little show." So I wrote a bunch of the songs, and I had made up the story about the dead nuns having to be buried and all the part of the
raising money to bury the nuns, right?
Well, and so Marilyn would use that story. So we had a little basis of a story, and we went to the duplex, not where it is now in the Village, with the original duplex on Grove Street. And they were going to let us come there for 4 weekends. And I think we ran 6 months or something, 5 shows a week. And then we wanted to move. And we had in there, Steve was one of the ones, we had a priest, a brother, and 3 nuns. And it was basically just a review in the sense that we had the story, they were trying to make money, but it was like the Carol Burnett show in that each little scene, they would be different characters. It wasn't a through line story. It would be a little sketch, just like you'd see on Carol Burnett. And, there was one where a nun they were at the funeral of a nun, and the priest and one of the other nuns were there. So, and there was like the funeral director, So they would play these different parts. And we kept trying to move it, and they said, no, it's a review. It's not a show. And then a director came in who tried to work with us, and he said it would be funnier with just nuns. And I said, well, all these people are in it. He said, well, we can't do it that way. The nuns together will be what we need to have for this. So we said, all right. And they said, well, can you write any of it? And I said, I don't know. I've never written a book to a show at that point, where it was like just going from scratch. And so I said, well, I'll try it. And I got quite a bit of it done. And we would try some things. And Steve never understood that I really wanted them to stay in it. But they just said, you know, this is it. You either, we're not doing it, or, you know, we have to switch to the nuns, because Steve was the priest. And it was quite risque when we were at the duplex. And they said, you know, you really have to make a story and start from scratch. And so I thought, well, I'll give it a shot. And so the director at that time was trying to work on it, said, I've got another project in England, and I just can't continue on this. But I'd had enough going where I said, you know what, let's just try it one more time. And even my agent said, all right, one more time, and then you'll do something else. And he used to always laugh about it. He said, I always told him not to do it. So we got one of the girls that we were working with knew the drama teacher at the Baldwin School, which is now the Calhoun School on 74th Street and off Amsterdam. And they had a little 99-seat theater that was an equity-approved showcase theater that their students would use, but also people could come in and use. And they had us come in and do like a run-through sort of thing of what we had, and agreed to let us do the show as a tryout there. And I think they let us do it for 8 weeks. And that's where we really got it on its feet and got it together and got it going. And then every producer that we would bring in would say, it's not going to work. It won't work. Even though we had great audiences laughing from beginning to end and all this. No, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. And so then I can't remember which came first, but I guess it was the stage manager, Trey Hunt at the time, said to me, why don't you produce it? I said, I don't know anything about producing. He said, well, you don't really have to. All you have to do is get a good general manager and he'll tell you everything to do. So I said, all right. So he knew this guy named Roger Gindy, who is now big-time general manager. And Roger was a company manager for Gatchel and Neufeld, which was a big company management. At the time, he was company managing Starlight Express. But they had told him if he wanted to work on a show on the side, because his goal eventually was to be a general manager, that it was fine with them. So we met with Roger, and he said, you know, he would do it. And then what he said was, you've got a lot of momentum going right now. People are talking about the show and they're liking it. And if you're going to move it, you've got to move it now. You know, you can't just let it go and then a year later try to do it. And the problem was we had to get the money. And I said, I don't know anybody who has that kind of money. And I'm also very shy about asking people for money. But then I figured out this idea that if this were a normal situation and somebody was coming in to produce the show, they would get the producer's share, I would get the writer's share, and the actors would get theirs. So I thought, actually, I don't really need the producer's share because normally I wouldn't even be getting it. So I decided what I would do is I would call up somebody like you and say, now, Bruce, I'm not asking you to give money, but each unit was $1,500. We had to raise $150,000. And I said, if you can find somebody to give $1,500, I will give you $1,500 worth of the producer's share for no investment at all. all you have to do is be the one who has the nerve to call the people. And I have found, I can call and ask for money for somebody else, and say, look, they asked me to do this. This is a favor. If you're interested, what you do. Well, I ended up with like 35 of my dearest friends raising money for the show. And the funniest thing was Andy Tobias, who is a big investment guru, who's had TV, investment programs and all that, and written books. I knew him a little bit, but not really well. And we were inviting these people, of course, to come to see the 8-week run. And I was talking to a friend who also knew him better than I did. And I said, I said, why don't you invite Andy? Because I knew Andy invested in some shows and he had a lot of money. And he said, oh, Andy's Jewish. He wouldn't like it. He's not going to want to come. So then this person found somebody else. One night, out of the blue, my friend Dan Critchett arrives with Andy Tobias because Dan was going to come, and Andy just came as his friend. He asked him to come see this show, which was nearby where he lived anyway. So they came over, and after the show, Andy came up to me and he said, I think this is really funny. And I would really like to support you in it. And I need a tax write-off this year. So, because his had, everything you put the money in a show, it was definitely going to be a tax write-off because it was going to be a bomb. And so he said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you $15,000. Well, $15,000 was a gold mine toward the 150 to us. I mean, people were giving money like 1,500, or two people would go together and give, $750 each. And so he said, come over to my apartment tomorrow and I'll write you a check. So I brought him the papers, and that meant, of course, Dan Critchett was going to get the finder's money, the same amount as a $15,000 investment. And so when I got there, he said, we're sitting at his kitchen table, and he doesn't bring out like a big checkbook like you'd think the big executive would do. He just takes his little checkbook like I use at the supermarket. And he said, I've been looking over my finances, and he said, I think that I could use a $25,000 tax write-off this year that would help me out. So he said, I'll give you $25,000. And being the shrewd investor that he is, he said, now tell me this. Could I be the person that find the finder for the other 10,000? I said, why not? So Andy gave 25, plus he got the finder's money for his 10. Dan Critchett got the 15,000 of the producer's share. And that's how we raised the money. And later, of course, after the show became a hit, Andy Tobias wrote in one of his investment books that the investing in Nunsense was the best investment he had ever made. He made so much money off Nunsense. And so that's really how it all got started, and was at the beginning of my new period of life's work.
How did the recording come into existence? Of the DRG, or who put out who first?
DRG put out the first one, and we had been running for a while before everybody was certain it was going to last. And funny thing was, we were at the Cherry Lane Theater, which we thought, I think it was probably one of the only ones even available at the time. And I had never realized how important walk-up business was to live theater. I mean, I could see people walking down the street and say, you know what, this movie looks good, let's go. But I never thought of people walking down the street and saying, oh, this play looks good. Let's, pay $25, $30 each and go in and see it. I always thought you planned ahead so that you'd find out where the theater was. Well, we struggled there at the Cherry Lane, but the audiences were
On
lovely.
residential streets. No one walked by unless they were visiting somebody on that street.
Exactly. And it was so charming if you ever got there. But there was the Circle Rep Theater, which was in Sheridan Square. And then it was the Garage Restaurant, and now it's something else. But it was right there where all the corners come together.
On 7th Avenue, right?
Yeah. And they were in trouble. And they wanted to rent out the theater for the rest of that season and then start again in September. And this would have been February or March. So we borrowed money and moved from the Cherry Lane into what was called Sheridan Square Playhouse then, and run by Circle Rep. And the first weekend, that first night we opened, on the street, we raked in $2,500. And back then that was 85. That was a lot of money off Broadway to draw in one night. And that is what saved the show. And by moving into there, then in that September of 86, Circle Rep wanted to come back and do their season. And so we had to move. And we could go to either the West Side Theater, which was before it was renovated, or the Fairbanks on 42nd. And the West Side had more seats, but it was a lot more expensive. And the Fairbanks was $199. But they said, if you go to the Fairbanks, you're going to have to do a TV commercial because people don't know that theater at that time. And so we said, okay, that was going to be our deal. And then by then, everything just took off. And
what did a TV commercial cost in those days?
I don't remember. I do remember we ran it only 1 week in each month. They said it's better to do one week solid than to do sporadically during the month, because you need to hit the people over and over and over and over and over, and then you can rest a bit, and then over and over and over. And then, of course, at that time, life was easy because everybody looked in the New York Times, no matter what you were going to go see. So we would do 3 ads a week in the New York Times, and we did Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. And that kept us going for 10 years. And as at the end of the first year, by then we had opened our first outside company in Philadelphia. And then it started to snowball. Some Dutch producer was in town and they licensed it for a tour of Holland. And then I think Boston was next. And both Boston and Philadelphia each ran 10 years like we did. I mean, I couldn't even relate to it. It was so unreal. And
so how many different actors would probably be necessary over 10 years? Actors.
We figure now there have been over 10,000 productions. It's been in, I think, something like 14, 15 countries and translated in 20 languages, or it's just all over the place. And this is the 36th year, and it's still going. And with the pandemic, of course, which stopped everything, now we're starting to get licenses. We have about 35 productions booked for late 2021 and 2022. Now, at this point, it's high schools, colleges, community theaters, all that stuff. But the Concord Theatricals that handles the licensing for all of my shows said, as the pandemic eases up, people want comedy. They want to laugh. And actually, Bruce, I think the proudest thing of the show for all of us who work in it is that we've saved over 100 theaters from bankruptcy over the last 36 years.
Tell us about Waterbury.
Yeah, Waterbury was one.
One of the original nuns took over that theater. Is that the story?
Yeah. Samina De Laurentiis was the original Sister Amnesia. She won the Outer Critics Circle Award as making the best. It was the best debut by an actress. The competition included Broadway, everybody. So that was incredible. And Samina had done the show in Los Angeles and decided she was going to stay out and work in television. And at that time, the writers went on strike. So nobody could work. And she came back home to Waterbury, and the Waterbury City Council or the Chamber of Commerce or somebody, I guess, asked her, could she help them start a theater situation, Waterbury, local one. And so they said they would do Nunsense, and they did it, I think, in the library. And they did it, and it was a big success. And then the Hamilton Park Pavilion, which was a old roller skating rink, was, I don't know whether it was going to be, was just up for rent or sale or be torn down or what. But anyway, the city convinced Samina to put together a group and move what is now Seven Angels Theater. And I think they've been operating for 25 years into the Hamilton Park Pavilion. And they're still going. And I'll say to Samina, how's it going? She said, first we're up, then we're down, then we're up, then we're down, then we're up. And she says, it just keeps going.
But the Nunsense show would take care of a season. But you could have some not so successful shows, and then here comes Nunsense. And
that was it. And she always said, anything with nuns will sell out here. So
when did you start to do a new edition?
The new edition was about 8 years in, and producers started asking, do us another one. All we want is the same show with new jokes and new songs. So I thought, okay. And my agent called and said, if I could get you a ton of money, would you do a sequel? And I was like, yeah, sure. Yeah, give me a ton of money. I'll do a sequel. So anyway, he made a deal. It ended up with Tams Whitmark. Our first show was with Samuel French, but he started a bidding war between Samuel French, Tams Whitmark, and MTI Music Theater International. And Tams won the bidding war. And they put up, so the advance money would be used to write the show. And that was I'm quite sure it was 93. I think that was the show had been running for 8 years in New York. And we'd had all these other companies running. And had I ever known that it was going to snowball like this, I would have made some of the stuff in this first sequel a little bit different. I think it's like I Love Lucy. If they'd known everybody was going to watch it every day of the week, they would have made sure that Ethel had the same middle name in every show. But, so what I did was basically use the framework and made it like a thank you program to the audiences that supported them in the first show. But as somebody said, and critics would say, well, it's just the same show with new songs and new jokes, which it was. And but the audiences loved it. The bookings just snowballed. And we probably had, I don't know, 200 shows going at once. But they were you know, just and all sizes of shows. We had big shows. We had a tour of it with stars. We had all these kind of things. So that's when that started. And I said, but the deal was with TAMS that I wouldn't write another show for 7 years. So I wouldn't be competing with myself there. But like 2 years later, I had this idea for the Nunsense Jamboree, which is the third show. And I thought, well, if I gave it to TAMS, they would let me write it if they owned it. So I went in and talked to them, and they said, yes, you know, if we can own it. And they always kept putting the 7-year thing in. But, you know, then if we can own it, you can do it. And so then the story of what the nuns were doing really started moving along. And we found that if like every 2 years, if I did another one, the round of theaters would pick up the new one, you know, and go. So it's gone all the way up to there are 7. And, but the 7th one, I said, that's it. We've done it all. We've been everywhere. We had the nuns on a cruise ship. We had the nuns in Las Vegas. We had the nuns at the school. And I felt actually the real 3 reasons are, number one, I felt like I had run out of how to present the nuns live, because every show plays in real time. You know, if a set falls down, the set falls down. That's what happened that night. So it has to be in real time, and the audience is there, present day. Like some of the shows that they've done in theaters that allow social distance, the nuns wear masks because that's what it is today. If you're coming in the theater today, you've got a mask on. And so I said, there's just no place else to do this type of show. Plus the fact that it originally, in the first few groups of shows, when we'd open them, all the rest of them we opened in Minneapolis because they had just a fantastic operation there at the Chanhassen Music Theater. They had a scene shop, a costume shop. They had 3 different theaters working in the complex. You were just almost guaranteed a good run. And so when it came to these other shows, there were probably 10 theaters that we knew would take the show whenever we could do it after Chanhassen. And now, of those 10 theaters, there's probably 3 that are still running. And of the 3 theaters in Chanhassen, there's only 1. And so I said, you know, it's too hard to get a show started. And now with Chanhassen only having 1 theater, they don't have a space where you could have 4 weeks rehearsal and 4 weeks of previews and all that, because they have to have that one big theater has to be running all the time to keep the doors open. And so with all that combination, I said that, and I had 7 shows, they were all hits. I said, I'm not pushing my luck. The next one could be a disaster. And that's when I decided to try the TV pilot. And we made a TV pilot with wonderful Broadway stars, with Karen Ziamba and Christopher Sieber and June Gable and Phyllis Smith from the TV show The Office, and Scott Willis from American in Paris, and what did I say, Karen Ziamba, who's my wonderful neighbor, and Beth Level. And it turned out really well. And whoever I've left out, I'm sorry. I'll think of you. Plus a couple of people from our regular show, which are Bambi Jones and Jane Tinker and some new people. Anyway, now we've been trying to hustle that, but with the pandemic, you know, mostly all we can do is things like visit with people like you, and then do we're doing a lot of press and little stuff just to keep the name out there. And as the theaters are starting to book and plan future seasons, that's mostly what's happening now, is just working on that kind of stuff.
How well have the recordings done? LPs and CDs and video, is that an important part?
They've done well. They do. We do a lot more business with the people who are coming to the shows or doing the shows or involved
You
in
have
the
a
shows.
table in the back with all the nonsense.
We always did. Now we're finding theaters less and less are doing that. It's really changed. Neil Simon said to my agent one time, a few years just before he died, he said, well, all we can say is we were there when it was good. And it's become so commercial in the professional theater, and the other theaters, because they're constantly fighting with, or not fighting, but competing with Netflix and Hulu and, you know, everything else online, and that it's harder and harder to fill up the theaters. And I think a lot of people are like, by the time they buy their tickets, it's like, we don't have any more money to buy sweatshirts and coffee mugs and everything else like they used to. They said now the only shows that really do well merchandise-wise are shows that have for kids, like Beauty and the Beast and stuff like that. And everybody is, you know, Mama, I gotta have this, I gotta have this. And so, all right, they get it for the kid. But, you know, we'll get people that order off the website who want stuff, and they order CDs and things like that. Or they, now we get a lot more, all of the CDs are on CD Baby, and we'll get tons of downloads rather than the buying of the actual CD. And now all 7 shows are on BroadwayHD.com, where they have you join the thing and you have unlimited viewing of tons of really great productions of Broadway shows. And so we have all 7 shows on there. So anybody who wants to see the whole show, and that's, you know, the stars of Rue McClanahan and Vicki Lawrence and John Ritter and those kind of people that, so if anybody wants to see the whole show or any other shows, I mean, the things like Sweeney Todd and with Angela Lansbury and those kind of shows are all on there. So that's kind of where we're at. But I tell you, it's been a hell of a great ride.
What was the story of Balancing Act? That was a little side.
Balancing Act, I did. There was one point before I did Nunsense 2 that my agent said, just write, if you want to write Nunsense 2, that's good, but write something different just so, you know, you have something different to show. So I wrote Balancing Act, which I thought at the time was really good. And what it was, there were 6 actors. 5 actors played 5 different personality traits of one person. And you didn't know whether it was a man or woman. It was just one person trying to get ahead in life. And there was was the optimistic side of the person, and the comic side of the person, and the pessimistic side, and the ambitious side, and the other one I think was the skeptical side. And just it amounted to like all of the thoughts in your head. The other character played 5 different characters, who was just totally on one track mind. This character was like we used a woman for the character, but she played both a man and woman. She would be like she always came on as Mrs. Lovett, and she was the character that was not the ambitious character, but her whole focus was to play that character on Broadway. Another one, her whole focus was on finding true love and romance. And so each one was like this. And they interacted when they were to be seen as a person. Everything was done exactly the same. They'd be sitting there and they'd be having coffee. Every coffee cup was go at the same time, all this. And a couple of the reviewers said they don't know how the actors learned it. But then when they were, sometimes the inside the head would be fighting with each other, kind of like we do, you know, should I stay, should I go, what should I do, that kind of thing. And I thought it was just wonderful. And we opened it in Semina's Theater at Seven Angels. And it got rave reviews. Everybody said this is so unique and the songs are wonderful and the actors are great and all this stuff. So we thought, wow, you know, we got the next big hit. And so we came into town at now the renovated West Side Theater. And we opened, but two of the people that we had built the show with could not do the show. They had other commitments. And with Nunsense, we used to change cast all the time and the show just went fine. So I didn't think that much about it. We found two people that were very good, but they were not exactly the same as the people that the show was built around. And it seemed like it played fine to me, but the reviews were like, interestingly, they were more, he should ask the nuns to pray for this show. Because the ad agency, and I didn't believe this, but now I think it was true. The ad agency said, the critics so resent the success of Nunsense that they felt that, you know, that fluffy little show did not deserve to have all this notoriety. He said, they're out to get you. And the reviews seem to always slant that way. Like, you know, they would put it like, this Nunsense writer does not deserve to have this. And so then, I mean, we struggled, we kept it open for a whole summer. But every time I would do something like that, I would learn so many things that I thought I'd known. The West Side Theater now, ever since they renovated it, it's very formal. It's like, you know, it's like it decorated so beautifully and perfectly. It's like you've come to watch a play and we applaud like this. And we'll be very polite. And even if we like it, we won't yell and scream. And the show was so about interacting with the stuff going on in this head that it took on a whole different meaning. And it really was, there was a fourth wall there that you didn't get past. And so, you know, we struggled and finally decided we just can't do it. They got some licenses, which seemed to be quite successful, but not enough to keep it going. But I, being one who was like, you know, if you beat the dead horse long enough, you'll turn into glue and you can sell it and make money. So I said, we're not giving up yet. We couldn't stay because we couldn't pay the bills anymore at the West Side. But I said, you know what we could do? Because the Fairbanks, Nunsense was playing a Sunday matinee and then Tuesday. So Sunday night and Monday night were off. I said, we're going to cut down this set and we're going to move it over to the Fairbanks and put drapes around the Nunsense set. And we're going to play balancing act on Sunday night and on Monday night, and 2 days a week. And we got to deal with equity to have actors, and we got to deal with the theater we could add 2 performances for just a little more rent. And the funny thing was, when we started doing that, the Fairbanks was a real, you know, open, audience friendly. It was nice, but it was not elegant by any means. So that you felt like you could come in the Fairbanks in jeans and yell at the stage if you loved the show, you know, and scream and that. And it was a much closer relationship to the audience. And we got a couple other people in the show. And the difference in the audience reaction was amazing. From, this is a lovely show, from, hey, that was great, you know? And so suddenly I realized how the ambience of the theater could make such a big difference to how they connected with the show and made it work, you know. And I think that, but it was a great experience, and I'll look back and think, you know, maybe we should have tried it again someplace or something. But at that time, if I had a new Nunsense, the doors were wide open. You know, all you had to say. By the time we got to the 3rd show, doing it in Chanhassen, nobody even at the theater even read the script. They just said, come, here are the keys to the theater, it's yours. And what was actually quite funny, Bruce, was in the middle of putting it together, we were like hitting walls in certain places, and I'm thinking like, oh my God, this is not working. And then I realized I couldn't even blame the theater. I couldn't say, well, you liked it and hired us, because they never read it. And they trusted us so much. And fortunately, we got it all figured out and it worked, and it was a success for them. And the shows would always run a year at Chanhassen, so they'd love to have us come there. And but it got to that point where I could say, you know, Nunsense. And even when I said to Chanhassen, could we try doing balancing act here? Well, we'd have to see it first. I don't know how that is. We don't know how that'll sell or how our audience will think. So
They probably did know that it hadn't been
Yeah.
a success in New York.
Yeah, but you know, every time we do a Nunsense, I'd say, I got a new Christmas show, Nutcrackers. Okay, when do you want to start? So how about we start rehearsal in September? Okay, perfect. And it was the greatest treasure that an author could ever have, because they gave us 4 weeks rehearsal, 4 weeks of previews, and we got a year's run. And all we had to do for them was give them half royalties of what normally would be charged. And I think that I directed for just the price of the pension and welfare or something. But it was just the dream of all time. And then we would record a cast album, and the cast albums helped us enormously, and the videos, from the fact that like community theater directors will use the CD, I mean the DVD to learn how to do the show. And somebody said to me, well, why wouldn't the director just direct the show? They said, you got to understand, the director is probably one of the salespeople at the Ace Hardware. All he knows how to do is how to recreate the show and tell the people how it goes and put them where they're supposed to be and all that. So people would say, well, if you don't have a DVD, we can't do it. Well, how do we know how to do it? And so we always, you know, would make a first class DVD. It was shot with 9 cameras. And, you know, and we would get them aired and all that. And so that also has helped us an enormous amount. And now with Broadway HD, where some theaters thinking like, would we like to do this? They can look at the show and check it out and see how it goes. And it also helps a lot to make sure that the show is relatively good if they get the idea of what what it was supposed to be and how we made it funny. So that's been
years ago. They were afraid to have people see it in the movie or something like that. They would say we can't, like Hello Dolly. They wanted to wait until the last time, and then okay, now we can make the movie. But now it seems that a video or a DVD enhances the interest. Oh, don't you love that show? I want to see it in person.
absolutely, and I think that's right. And the same thing with the summer stock and all that. We want to put it on. And a funny thing, I heard this story. You know, the original Nunsense takes place on the set of Grease. Funny little side story for you. When we were first at the Baldwin School, and they asked us to do the, you know, little run through to see whether they would approve the show and let us do it. The 8th graders were putting on Wait Until Dark. And so the set was Wait Until Dark. And we had a little audience there and everything. So I went up to the audience. I said, you know, usually somebody comes up to the front and says, imagine the set, and it's going to be this and it's going to be this. And I said, our set is going to be in the school auditorium. And, you know, it's going to have green drapes and some chairs and stuff because it's going to be in the school. If it's a really rich school, it's going to have paneling and nice chairs. So I want you to pay no attention to the set here because the 8th graders at the school are putting on Wait Until Dark. So it has nothing to do with us. Pay no attention to the set. So I'm watching the run through and I thought, oh my gosh, wouldn't that be fabulous if it was playing on a real set? It would be so much more interesting than drapes and things in an auditorium. And I was watching and I thought, it'll be Hello Dolly. And it'll be the Harmonia Gardens set, and we'll have the big stairs, and we'll have the things where you could open and close the drapes on either side. And so when the thing was over, I'm sitting talking to cast and stuff, and listen, I have this brilliant idea. We'll do it on the set of Hello Dolly. And we got talking a bit about it, and they said, well, you know, I don't know if the 8th graders in most of these schools will be putting on Hello Dolly. They'd probably be putting on Grease because that would be more like the show. And we said, that's it. We'll put it on the set of Grease. Well, somebody said, first of all, do you have to get permission? And I said, well, I don't know. I mean, you can't use their design of the set. But so luckily, it turns out that the writers of Grease had the same agent as mine. So they were thrilled with the idea that their show would get advertised every time a Nunsense went on. And the only thing we couldn't do was, because you guys had the sign of Grease up there, was to use the Grease logo with the G, like I said, like that, instead of this kind of G, because we could not use their logo. That was copyrighted or licensed or something. But otherwise, we could just say this is the set of Grease, and we had a picture of Marilyn Monroe and a picture, you know, and but and so one hand washes the other for years. But the interesting thing is, I have found out when they made the movie of Grease, and Grease was running on Broadway, they somehow did not get in a release date in the movie contract from the writers and ICM. And so the agent, because they planned to release it, you know, while the show was running, and the agent said, the only way you can release it is if you put at the end of the show this little trailer that says, now come to Broadway, where you can reach right out and touch it. And they had the Broadway logo thing and the thing. And the box office on Broadway went through the roof. And I think that was the first time people said, you know what? This may work to our advantage. So, you know, it's like one time they were doing Nunsense at Westbury with Edie Adams. And our show was running off Broadway. And they said, why would you ever allow them to do that? And I said, the people going to Westbury are not going to schlep into New York to an off-Broadway show. We're going to get a huge audience out there. It'll be advertised in the Long Island papers, and 2 weeks later, they won't remember whether it was Westbury, and they'll see an ad for New York and say, oh, let's go see this, you know? So I said, honest to God, it will help. And it really did. They said, you know, these audiences are different. If they like it, they'll tell their friends and they'll say, well, Westbury's gone. We got to go to New York. So it all has kind of worked terrifically well. And just, it's been so much fun the whole time. I mean, between rehearsal and putting on the shows and hearing the people laugh and just all of that stuff. I mean, it's just been a riot. And I've worked now, we counted out, with 38 stars, with, you know, people like Rue, and just on the show with Cindy Williams and Laverne and Shirley and Sally Struthers. You know, you just go down the list, and we had the all-star tour we had Kay Ballard, Lee Merriweather, Mimi Hines, Darlene Love, and Georgia Engel, all in one company. And I got to tell you, we did a 21-week national tour, and traveling with those ladies, hearing the stories that they had to tell, would just, Kay Ballard would have, guys, come on here. I got Doris Day on the phone. We got to sing happy birthday to her. Another time, Marlon Brando called her. And we're like, oh my God, we can't believe that we're literally a part of this operation, you know? And it was just, I've just had the most amazing experiences with the most wonderful people. So I'm truly blessed.
Have they ever done it with schools? When I go to see a school musical in Connecticut, they always have so many more people. Do you allow them to have 40 or 50 nuns?
We have the mega nonsense ready for you. And it started when my partner Scott said to me, he said, you know, high schools like to have everybody in the show, even if they're little parts.
Don't turn anybody down. I believe if you audition,
right. So
you're in the show.
So I made the mega nonsense, and it has like 10 or 12 characters with lines, plus you could have a chorus of 50. And when Mike Isaacson, who runs the St. Louis Muni, and I wish I had a picture I could put up for you, but asked me, would you like to do Nunsense at the Muni? Which, for people who don't know the Muni, it seats 11,000 people, and it's outdoors.
Right.
And he says, we'll do it Muni style. I said, well, we've got the Nunsense mega musical. And we did the show at the Muni. We had 50 nuns, 10 Broadway stars, and 17 children in the show. And it was the biggest thing ever. And I ran into Danny Burstein, who many people know is a wonderful, wonderful Broadway star. And I said to him, Danny, my career is over. He said, what do you mean? He said, I've just done Nunsense at the Muni, where we played to 11,000 people every night. And there's never going to get anything bigger or better than this. And that's where actually I worked with Dee Hody and Beth Level and met all these people. But the funny thing was, there was one night we didn't have 11,000 people. And it was 4th of July. They had, you know, activities everywhere in St. Louis going on 4th of July. And they said the year before they only had 1,500 people. So comes 4th of July night, and the stage manager announces places. And he said, I just want you to know it's a small house. We only have 5,000 people. But that would have run 2 years in New York with the 5,000 people. There it was. That was their small house, 5,000 people. And they were thrilled to death that they got 5,000. And we're just laughing ourselves silly that was our small house. but the audiences were just amazing. And you'd have to kind of wait on some of the laughs as it went up the rows of the 11,000 people. But
Isn't it free on the very top? Isn't there a period where you could just be at the top of the hill and see it for free?
See it for free, but you could sit in seats. They had a top amount of rows that you could come for free, and people would come real early. And you know, the Muni is in the huge park, the St. Louis Park, and you could come. They have picnics and everything, and even people who come for the regular show would just sit in the regular down lower will come. They bring picnics and all that in the whole park. Forest Park. I couldn't think of the name of it. It's a park. I think it's second only to Central Park in size, and it's where the St. Louis Zoo is and everything. So, but if you come at the top, you can come in, and they'll come early so that they can get those free seats. And the great thing is, they knew if when you're up there, it's like Dodie Goodman used to say, who played Mother Superior for me several times. She said, you don't even know who's talking. You just, all you can say is you were there. But they have the most incredible sound system, because they knew if you're looking down there and you're just seeing like ants run around, and they teach you how you know, you raise your hand or make a move or something if you're speaking. For the people who are far back. If you're down in the front part, you just feel like you're at a regular theater. But the sound system is so phenomenal that if you're sitting in the last row, it sounds like you're listening to a recording of the show. It's so beautiful, because they knew that if you couldn't hear, the game was over. And if the sound wasn't crispy clear and real good. And of course, they have a big orchestra in that. And so the people up at the top were great. And we have a line which we always use when there's a balcony. But when the Sister Amnesia would say, now, all of you people up there, hi, don't you feel left out, because you're so much closer to heaven. And of course, you'd hear this huge laugh come just from the back, and they would come way down like there. And it was just, some of those things were just the sweetest things. And I got to tell you, see 50 nuns tap dancing it was just the most exhilarating experience. And
Did you direct this? Who directed it?
I directed it with Matt Lenz. What happened when and Terry Gibson, who's our choreographer, choreographed it. But I said, listen, I know that I am not equipped to direct 50, 60 people. And Matt Lenz had recreated several shows for the Muni, like, because he was the assistant director on Hairspray and on some shows like that. So I said to Matt, why don't we do this together? And you know how to manage all these people and direct them. Terry can choreograph them, and I'll work with the main characters with the comedy. And so that's how we decided to do it. But the funny thing was, they told Terry, what she obviously had to choreograph, everyone is in the tab number. So she had to choreograph like 60 people in the tab number. And they had to come out, and she did this phenomenal thing, you know, where it's like they were going in a circle and all this, and then they would spread out. But the kids who were supposed to be school kids were in these little school uniforms, and some of them were maybe, I don't know, 5th grade, something like that, maybe 10 years old, 11 years old. And they said, because the parents of the kids donate a lot of money, and the kids are in their school program, theater school program, the kids have to be in the show in different places. And we said, okay, you know, we can put them in, and they absolutely have to be in the tab number. So Terry thought, oh my God, we got to put these 17 kids in the tab number. After the first day with the kids, Terry and I are out to dinner, and she said, Danny, she said, some of these kids, and Terry's a great tapper, she said, some of these kids can tap better than I do. They were phenomenal. And then one day she said to them, does anybody have a jump split? Every one of the 17 up in the air and bam down in a split. And it was so much fun because she had the 17 kids do that on their own. And all the rest of the nuns are there like going, oh! So it was just an amazing experience to see Nunsense that big and have like the one chorus line where all of them are across the front of the stage doing the kick line, and they just run from one end to the other, and it's just like, oh my God, who would ever have believed that, you know, little Nunsense could ever started as a joke would be like this. And it's like I say, it's just the most rewarding thing. And we always have our naysayers, you know, who say, oh, this is just silly corn. Somebody wrote, said, people say this is worthless fluff. Well, it may be fluff, but it sure ain't worthless. So, and that was always our goal too. It's like, it was always about making people laugh. No politics, no religion. We rarely ever get anybody offended because it has nothing to do with religion. It's like an I Love Lucy sketch with nuns. And so that it's all about the comedy and them being in these incongruous situations. And it just makes it so that it's just all fun. And there's nothing more rewarding than having people going out saying, oh my God, I never laughed so hard. I had such a great time. And that's why Concord said we're going to be really popular after the pandemic. People are going to just be so anxious to go out and laugh and have a good time. So I hope they somewhere along the line get to see them all.
Well, it certainly sounds like you've had a pretty great life.
I sure can't complain. Somebody asked me one time, they said, are you going to retire? And my business manager said, retire from what? He's never had a job. All he's done is have fun all his life. And I must say, there've been the days way back where, you know, I had to clean the neighbor's apartment to pay for the rent in mine. But so I've had all those experiences, but man, I've just really been so blessed, and not only blessed to have success, but to have so much fun and so many fun, wonderful people surrounding me and all that I do, that it's just, it's been a constant party. And there's a group of the nuns that we use mainly, like if we go out, and we still go out with our company when they want you to come, and places like Bucks County or somewhere, they want you to come, bring the set, bring the show. We did the Sharon Playhouse last year. On Sundays at 5:30, they do a Zoom, and who's ever home or wants to chat comes on. Sometimes it'll be 3 people, sometimes it'll be 10. And what are you doing? And, you know, when are we going to do another Nunsense and that? And so it's really, truly been the ride of a lifetime.
Again, thank you very much. And I think even after you and I are not here, there will still be Nunsense.
Oh, people would be laughing forever. And that's the only thing I said. I want to see them.
Well, I want to be on an urn. I want to be in an urn in my living room, so I can see what's going on.
Yes, hold them up there. Show them around. Be in the freezer with the other sisters. Well, this has been so great, and it's so nice to see you again. And I've really enjoyed this. This has been so much fun.
Well, good. So hopefully in a short while we'll get it up on YouTube, and people can experience all you've gone through.
Yeah, been quite a ride. And and thank you so much for asking me. This is the most fun, just to sit and talk and laugh about all this stuff and have a good time. And you look like you're doing great and feeling good, and you're having fun. So That's
Yeah,
the,
too much snow, but
oh
the
yeah,
snow will eventually go away.
it will. Yes,
Yeah.
this is like when I was in Michigan, you know, and we never had a snow day ever. We had our boots on. We'd walk through snow like this, you know, trudge in, and that's the way it was. But yeah, and I hear we're getting more this week, so gonna have to think of, well, of course everybody's thinking indoor stuff to do now. It's not such a trick, but stay well and stay safe, and we'll get through this thing and get everybody back up on stage again.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, take good care.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye bye.